Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Moxtober daily recap. Today I'm joined by Gateways7 of the MSE community and Bradley Rose from Beacon of Creation. Today's word is mystic, and for those of you who don't know what Moxtober is, it's an annual event where for each day of the month of October there's a different one-word prompt, and using that one-word prompt, people make different creative endeavors surrounding the game of Magic the Gathering. Most people make custom cards, which is what we look at in these daily recaps, but people also write articles, draw art, or make deck lists. It's basically anything creative related to Magic the Gathering. So, I think. Oh, yeah, and also, as always, all of the cards we feature in today's episode can be found in the description with designer credits, as well as the full MSC and MTG.design files, and instructions on how you can potentially get your own cards featured in these recaps. But yeah, with that, let's get into it. And my first card for the day is going to be from the MSC file, and it's Mystic Journal, tagged as designed by MadOlaf. I think this card is really cool. It's 4 for an artifact, and it has 3 tap, conjure a random card with mana cost equal to the mana spent to activate this ability. And I think that this is super cool. It essentially is like, well, we have Momer Vig, and now we have Conjure. Is there a way that we can make Vig effects using Conjure that in a way that doesn't involve emblems or an entire format? And this does it in a pretty cool way. And obviously, it's even more specific than Vig, where it's not just the converted mana value, but it's the specific cost that you're paying. Um, and yeah, I think that capping this at 3 is really interesting because it means that you can't, like, if you go 4C, you can be pretty much guaranteed to get specific cards in the same way that, like, in Momer Vig, you can be guaranteed, like, once you hit 9 mana, you're pretty, or like, I forget what it is, but I remember, like, there's, like, if you hit 9 mana, you're pretty guaranteed to get Zakama, and then you can just kind of go off, stuff like that. At least in, like, Arena Momer Vig. Here it's like, well, you can't just oops into a specific card, you kind of have to work for it. Um, but yeah, I'm a big fan of this in general.
Yeah, the 3 cost is a very smart choice here because a lot of spells land in the 3. Uh, I like that the the mystic part plays out 2 ways. One is the oh whoa what's gonna happen? It's we don't know. That's the one part there. The other part is uh I this gets me wanting to find out and like calculate what's the best mana cost to get me the to be most likely to result in a card that would favor me in the situation. Like I might be hesitant to get one blue if I think that a lot of cancel variants is not what I need right now, and I might not do that. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I think the card's a lot of fun. I think especially my favorite part about this is how you can be really specific about your mana costs and let that sort of affect how you play the game. So, for instance, like if you want, normally you're pulling from like, for instance, two and a white or whatever, but because the mana you're spent to activate this ability usually is going to be all colored, you can specifically tap in certain ways to really maximize your value. Like if you tap for blue blue black or blue blue green, both of those 100% of the time get you a counterspell. Void Slime and Undermine respectively. I think it's named Undermine. So it's like I think it's really cool like to think about the specific ways in which you can tap mana in order to nail specific cards and then have those as part of your repertoire.
I just realized something. Um, so you can't spend generic mana. You can only spend colorless, and now those will actually result in cards that have colorless in the cost, not generic.
Oh wait,
So
oh god.
yeah, I missed that
Yeah.
until just now. Yeah.
Maybe.
So this can only get most really color all colors in the mana pips.
Yeah. Maybe I want. I don't know how you would change it to quote unquote fix that, but I think that that's definitely an important point. Maybe it's like, and then I can see doing something where I was thinking like you ex like uh you exile something, you exile a card from your graveyard, and you conjure a card with the same casting cost as it. But no, that doesn't work. With the same mana symbols and its casting cost, you could probably do mana symbols and its casting cost, or you could
I
do
think the
conjure a random card uh, that has the same mana symbols in its casting cost as, uh, yeah, I don't know. Jeez.
I mean, you could just do that has the same mana cost. Like, doesn't seem too difficult, right? Because if something in your graveyard costs like 2 and a green, its mana cost is still 2 and a green, just because.
Yeah,
Like you can't pay the 2,
the
but
main
you
thing
can
is like
still, yeah.
if you want to give people the flexibility to reference costs that they don't have in their deck, how do you do that? Or don't have like currently on hand, how do you do that? There
Yeah,
might not be.
there's probably a weird workaround with like X is a cost and then some sort of like way to abuse around that. I don't know the specifics, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, something to note if you want for brainstorming is that there is at least one current magic card that references the word references generic mana on Giganta. So you could say that colorless mana spent this way counts as generic mana or whatever if that doesn't feel too hacky.
Yeah, and that only cuts out a small range of spells anyways, so probably not going to be super relevant in your average game. Um, but yeah, okay, Bradley, what's your next card?
Okay, let's head on over to mtg.design. This is the card called Mystic Mirror. All right. So this one features Shadowmoor's untap symbol, which I think itself feels mystical. You're like, what the heck? I know I felt that way when I first saw it. But the gameplay here that it introduces also is kind of a little bit of a thinker right here. It's your opponents may be trying to think, well, do I want to take advantage of this? If I do, I'd be giving the controller you maybe even more mana during my turn, maybe even like enough to do flash in something or do a counter spell during that same phase, something like that. So I like how it makes you both think a little bit, but also feel a little odd.
My thing is, I feel like it's a little hard for opponents to potentially take advantage of this, just because, like, unless they're on a deck with a lot of instants or flash, um, they only like it's like they get to add 1 mana, which maybe they can use for activated abilities or whatever. But yeah, it still seems like super limited. And in exchange, uh, actually, actually, yeah, and I don't like the play pattern because, uh, your opponents just like on their main one or uh, on their upkeep, they just tap this down so you can't use it, and they'll just pass to, and then they just pass to their main two and cast stuff, so you don't actually get to use the mana ever after the first turn, assuming that you cast something. So I think I actually read this over and was considering it for my list, but I passed it over because I feel like it's one of those cards which is cool in theory, but the current play patterns end up being like it doesn't
Right.
actually end up in the mind game that, or like
Yeah,
the mini game that it's trying to enable.
I
Actually,
think
to
it's
correct
not.
something, I think you they can't actually tap it down during their upkeep. Is that what you meant? They try to tap it down
Yeah,
during
or
their
I meant
upkeep.
like main. They tap it down at their main phase one, and then they just go swing through combat, and then main two they
They
cast whatever spells so that you can't just.
they
Oh
actually
wait,
can't. Mystic Mirror untaps during their untaps up. They're stuck with no mana rock.
oh yeah,
So
wait. Oh never mind.
just to correct it. Okay.
Oh never mind. But then yeah, okay. In that case, it's just uh, it's still just I feel like then it's just a 2 mana signet, which is still really strong. And unless your opponent is on a very specific deck, they can't actually punish you for getting a 2 mana signet. So
Mm, mm.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty easy fix to this card because I agree with all the critiques you made, Caio. But I think the concept here is really sick. I think if you just have it like at at the beginning of every upkeep, if you activated its ability last turn, it just passes to the next player or something like that, where you know you kind of have a play pattern where this kind of wheels around the table if you used it, and if you didn't, you keep it and get to use it later. I think that kind of keeps the same general idea without being as fiddly with the taps and the untaps, and still maintaining like a cool play pattern.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It
I
could
can totally
also
see that.
feel like other people are going through like the mirror, like they're taking turns looking at the mirror as well. That's pretty cool. Or maybe even like how does it mysteriously show up in different rooms? Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's again, it's one of those cards that like, I really want to like it, but I think it needs like a slightly different core concept. But yeah, I agree with the idea of kind of like this mini game of like, I get the mana, you get the mana, we all get the mana, but then there's like timing restrictions on the mana, so we gotta make a good use of it. There's something interesting there, so I definitely get why you picked it. Um, Next up, what is your first card going to be, Gateways?
So we're going to stay in the design file, and we're going to look at Mystic Tutor. Mystic Tutor is one red and a green for a sorcery that tutors for a druid, elemental, shaman, or beast creature card, puts in your hand, and shuffles your library. I think it's probably a bit overcosted, could pretty easily be red green, but I think it's just a really cool and simple way to demonstrate a kind of mystic based wild sort of tutor. And I think that the types of creatures that it pulls based on the tutor, it's a good list of creatures that has a lot of different variants in terms of their usual effects on the board and what they do. For because like you're hitting druids and shamans, so you can hit mana dorks, cheaper creatures that have a lot of incremental value or small things that they can do, and then you can hit elementals and beasts, so you can get bigger creatures that do a lot more interesting things. And I think that like variance, the fact that that variance exists is really cool, and it's like a cool, I guess, semi batch of cards to care about. It's flavorful. I think it works mechanically, and overall, I think the card is just like a really nice and simple package that does it for me.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the batching here. One thing is, I agree that it's a little overcosted, and even at red green, there's Eladamri's Call, which just gets you any creature, no questions asked. So, one thing that I would like a little bit more for this is if it added, I don't know what, but some non creature type to it, um, so that there's a little bit more flexibility there. And I think that also makes the batch a little bit more spicy slash interesting, perhaps. But other than that, yeah, I think it's just really solid.
I like the color distribution among these types. Beast, we've seen some fun stuff in Onslaught Block across red green. Shaman is popular with both colors of red green. Druid is more green, and then like elementals are mostly red with like flame can and other such. So that's a good picks.
Okay. Next up, I'm going to call out from the MSC file Freshwater Mystic, designed by Elry. It's one white for a 1/2. Whenever an opponent casts a non creature spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays one for each merfolk you control. And I really love this. It's weird and wacky in a number of ways, and a number of ways it didn't have to be, but uh, it ended up being much cooler as a result of. So this is, I think, pretty fairly obviously a riff on Mystic Remora, the classic, the Ristic Studies little brother, where I believe it has a cumulative upkeep, and every time an opponent casts a non-creature spell, they may pay 4. Otherwise, you draw a card. Um, and here it kind of tweaks that, puts it into white because white loves this rule setting. Um, and I love the idea of adding the merfolk there because it really could just be unless that player pays 1. But now you're encouraged to put it a little bit more tribal, and it asks this question of like, oh, okay, where are we seeing white merfolk? What is the greater context of this card? Um, so yeah, I think it kind of firmly established itself as like, hey, yeah, this is cool space that white can do, which is a thing that a lot of designers have been doing recently, but also does that on the flavor end or on the, I guess, tribal end, and I think that's really cool. So yeah, it's a simple, but it's a simple card, but one that brings up a lot of questions slash answers with regards to white.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a really cool, simple design. Definitely very evocative of the Lorwyn sets with the Merfolk tribal element, the weirder art style. Freshwater theming because I believe that was something that was mentioned in Lorwyn. But yeah, I think this design is a really cool riff on the sort of Esper Sentinel type cards we've been getting recently, and giving it a tribal bent is a really cool way of making it still a very good card, but like really narrowing down on the kind of decks that it wants to go in instead of just being a generic value engine for like a white commander deck. So overall, I think this is like a really excellent design, and I'd be super hyped to play it in like a Merfolk tribal deck on a competitive level.
Props to choosing when choosing Merfolk, it landing at white here for the whole package. It reminds me of the Forerunners cycle in Rivals of Ixalan, having being able to tutor for creature cards, and like for example, the vampire one had it on a white vampire, so it wasn't just a free, easy like, oh, vampires are usually black. In this case, it challenges you to just not go purely mono blue Merfolk. You are stretching out for get the sweet effect in white for Merfolk decks.
Yep, yep. Okay, Bradley, what is your next card going to be?
Okay, let's go to the MSE file this time. Let's go to Amateur Mysticism. All
Okay,
right.
I would like to say
So
for the record before you start on this was going to be my next card, but then I was like, someone else is going to mention this, so let me not choose it, and someone else is going to mention it,
sniped it.
and then nailed it. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Sweet. Okay. So this one is a teamer spell, which is cool and great because elemental or elementalisms is usually found in these three colors, which I think fits great for the kind of effects that you get here. So you get to like quote unquote splice on some effects here, and it's mostly all good choices here. I think the blue is a little underrepresented. It's more of a rummage than a loot for the second mode, but I think it does pretty not bad of a job. And I want to go and give a little chef kiss for paying attention for when put 2+1 counters on a creature you control, because when you're putting an effect on a spell that's already on the stack, you got to already or I guess as you're casting it, it gets messy maybe or illegal, I don't know, for when you're trying to choose targets. So avoiding the word target for that was maybe a very mindful choice.
Yeah, I don't know if there's much else for me to say about this card. It's kind of an insanely cool build around um, that goes a lot of different directions, but solidly hey says, hey, play spells and do cool stuff with them. Um, I also just love the flavoring of this. I think more cartoony art sometimes like can feel out of place, but I think here the art choice with the teamer and everything, it it fits the flavor in a really solid way. Yeah, I'm kind of struggling to find stuff to talk about just because I'm just like tripping over myself saying this good, this good, this good. So yeah,
Yeah,
shout out to gynoidpoet for this.
yeah. I think my favorite piece of this design is probably the this spell deals 2 damage to each opponent. Part of it specifically because there's like a lot of different ways that it can go, and like have more capability that the other two abilities don't really have. In terms of like if you have the, I believe it's Precinct White or something like that, that gives like your instant and sorcery spells Death Touch, or Soul Fire, something that gives them Lifelink. Um,
Soulfire
I guess Death Touch.
Grandmaster. Yeah.
Soulfire Grandmaster. That one's more relevant than the Death Touch one. But I think like having the fact that this spell deals damage, that's something that's a lot more relevant, and that's like because it's something that this spell is doing, you can get a lot of cool niche effects with it. You can pick up the new card from Innistrad, Rem Corollas, Stalwart Slayer. He triggers off of this, and I think it's like a really cool. I really like cards that modify spells rather than just like adding things to them. And I think like this, while it is technically adding something to it, the fact that you're adding this spell means that you have room to modify it based on that. And I think it's like I love cards that do that sort of thing.
Yeah, and modifying the spells themselves adds to that feeling of like, yeah, I'm just brewing something up, and we'll see what effect gets added to my potion or spell in this case. So yeah. Okay, Gateways, what is your next card going to be?
So I want to look at a card from the MSE file designed by Provocative. The card is Creativity. It's named Creativity. I just wanted to shout out Provocative. This card is nuts. It's red, red, red for an enchantment that pays 1 life to add colorless. Spend this mana only to cast spells from anywhere other than your hand. I think this is. I have no idea if this is balanced or not. I'm going to guess no, but I think this is a really excellent, a really fun design, at least. Being able to have that a huge amount of mana production, but only being able to have strong limitations on what you can use it on that are relevant and that make you want to do red things, flashback, exile from the top of the library, all those sorts of fun stuff, and setting up hoops to go through before you can land your huge Eldrazi beater. I think it's a really neat design. I think the flavor works really well. My one gripe is that it isn't a villainy riff, but hey, what you gonna do? I think this is a super awesome design. Even if it's not that balanced, not 100% sure on that.
I think one way that you can easily balance it is make it so that it's like just 0 add colorless. Creativity deals 1 damage to you for each time you've activated this ability this turn. So it starts becoming cumulative.
Ooh, that's fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, I agree on this one. In fact, the phenomenon that happened to Caillou happened to me. This is also on my list too. That's awesome. I like how you're thinking outside the hand. I guess in this case, what creativity sometimes is attributed with that line. This makes me want to pair it up with experimental frenzy and go nuts.
Yeah, I assume stuff like that is why it doesn't say add red straight up.
Yeah, that's right. You'd have to. Oh, yeah. I like that you mentioned the Eldrazi part, gateways, because that does get around what normally would be. Oh, so it costs 3 red to play this. So it actually also is like a deck building challenge too. If you do have some red cards, you are limited by your red sources. To if you want to keep going and going and going.
Yeah, it's just a solid, cool engine. And like you said, I don't know that it's balanced in its current state, but I think that there's enough of a cool design seed here and a lot of knobs that you can easily tweak. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this design. Next up, my next design is going to be coming from the mtg.design file. It's going to be Mystic Milestone. And last year for Moxtober, I think we had like several Moxen each day, definitely helped by Cajun designing a Mox each day. This year we haven't been getting as many of them, and that made me sad. But then I saw this and I was like super giddy. So this card is insanely cool. So shout out to, I think it's CabecaCopo. I think that's how you pronounce it for this one. So on its own, it's just a manolith. We love manoliths. They're solid commons. But you can foretell this to turn it into a 5-color Moxen on future turns. And I love the idea of just like, yeah, this can be a balanced Moxen, because to make it a Moxen, you have to pay the upfront cost of 2, and then you can't do it that turn itself, so it's not a Arcane Signet or whatever in a normal format. But yeah, it's like such a simple and evocative design. I and yeah, again, I say this every episode, but slam dunk into the Moxtober cube. But I think lots of the cards I've shouted out from Moxtober cube before are like very functional and interesting in that respect. But I think this one also has like a splash factor to it, which is really hard to do with commons. It's really hard to get a splash factor on there, especially um, without like foretell is a mechanic, but it's a mechanic that we've already seen in a set before and seen what it can do. So yeah.
We are firing on all cylinders today. This was also on my list here, and I like this maybe balance between what standard or limited wants and what commander wants. Because sometimes, like, I would love to play this turn two. Like sometimes I play a turn two mana rock, and I don't have a one mana card to play after that if I play my arcane signet. So this is essentially yet another copy for that. When I foretell it on turn two, it's like it says ETB tapped, essentially for me. So this is cool. I like how it's kind of in between Z's there.
Yeah, I think this card is super sick. I also think it's kind of nutty in a way that I don't know if is too strong or not. But like when I first saw this, my first thought was like, hey, better rampant growth in all colors. And I know it's definitely like a mana rock. That's inherent weakness compared to it being a land. But like off rip, I don't know if a standard environment could handle a 2 mana rock that adds mana of any color instead of like colorless or something. But like on a cube level, on a commander level, I think this is a really really sick card, and I'd love to test it out. Having the normal mode of being able to play it and then tapping it, or just foretelling it out for pretty cheap. Although I think one gripe I have with the design is that there's usually never not a reason to foretell it. I think unless you want fixing, and you're casting another spell on that turn. Because if you want to pay 2 and then next turn you get a mana, that's effectively the same thing as like paying 3 and then getting one of that mana back. So I feel like in most cases it's better to foretell this, even if you're on 3 mana. But that's not really a huge issue because it also gives your opponent less time to kill it, which is also, you know. But yeah, it's sick.
For sure, and I think that those are some valid criticisms of the play patterns, but we'll have to see how it ends up in practice. Um, Next up, Brad, what is your next card for the day?
All right, mtg.design. Let's stay here and go to Mystic Leyline. All right, so ley lines are magical and sometimes mysterious, although not to experts of the ley lines. But in this case, I think it's a maybe popular thing that people like to play around with modes. But I think choosing a card that it does do something related to modes for the theme of Mystic is a great timing, great choice to do. And this is very simple execution of that for an enchantment. I like the ley line part to make it not just almost like a do nothing thing like the other ley lines. You get a little bonus if you start out with it, which is cool. If you got a 1 mana mode spell, you're ready. You're off to the races.
Yeah, I wonder, like, I don't know, because I feel like I inherently don't like the play pattern of ley lines. Like, this is just a personal thing, but like, I think what ends up happening a lot of the time is if you don't have them in your opener, they're kind of not great because they have to be below rate. And if you have them in your opening hand, they're oinky kaboinky nuts because you get them for free and then you can just kind of go ham. And I think the thing of like yeah, like choosing all available modes is like there are very good cheap modal spells in this game. There are very good like mid modal spells in this game, and like it's not as though like there aren't a good handful of spells that are playable on their own and are modal. Like, I mean, obviously off rip, the easiest one is like Cryptic Command or something, um, where there even 2 modes is takes the cake. Um, So yeah, I like the idea of a modal build around, and I kind of feel like I would like this more as like just one blue blue without the leyline text, just because of how much having this in your opening hand can affect the play pattern of an entire deck. But I do agree that like the leyline part of it is slightly mitigated by being a build around for a mechanic that isn't really been archetyped before, so there isn't as much support, and not being a hate piece, so your opponent isn't essentially locked out of the game turn 0. So
Yeah, I personally I think this is a really cool concept. I also think it's super super easily abused. Um, First thing that came to mind instantly, Umezawa's Jite, because this is spell or ability. Imagine, being able to pop off all three modes at once with the Jite. Archmage's Charm, blue 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 counter target spell, draw 2 cards, gain control of something. There's just a lot of stuff that this goes absolutely nuts with, and it is like a steep cost to get there because it's a card out of your opening hand that, although you're not paying mana for it, it's still like card disadvantage kind of. But dang, there are really just some super crazy buffs that you can take with it, and I don't know. I don't know how it stacks up to other ley lines, but like I'd definitely be worried about the power level. But conceptually, I think this is really cool, and I think like honestly, if this just was like a normal permanent that you paid mana for, I don't know how much mana it would need to be, but like I think it'd just be a fine design. So yeah,
okay, Gateways, what is your next card?
the next card I want to look at is on MTG Design. It's Fragile Entity. So Fragile Entity is a member of the uh, it looks like an attempt at being a member of the MH2 Evoke cycle that exiles cards from your hand as an evoke cost. So it's a 5-drop artifact creature elemental golem. When it enters the battlefield, choose a card in exile you own. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the converted mana cost of the chosen card, and then it has evoke to exile a colorless non-land card from your hand. So inherently, a lot of the evoke cards are a lot stronger than they look, but I think this one is. I'm not sure where it stacks up balance wise compared to them, because on one hand, the first ability is super crazy. If you're able to match up a card in exile, you're able to snipe out your opponent's board, maybe hit multiple things at once and go ham. But on the other hand, there are two very severe deck building constraints and drawbacks that come with this ability. The first is that the evoke cost, exile a colorless non-land card from your hand. It's way harder to pick up colorless cards than it is cards of any color, especially when you're trying to do effects that maybe for this card, like you want blink effects in your deck. How are you going to get instant speed blink in colorless? And so the evoke is going to be something harder to do because colorless cards obviously are going to be not as on rate as their colored equivalents, and that's going to make it difficult. And I think the other piece is that choose a card in exile you own. That's a pretty steep requirement to be able to nuke a certain type of board state, because you have to not only get a card into exile of that value, but also like make sure that you have multiple cards in exile so that you can hit whatever value you want. Because otherwise, you're silver bulleting against a specific kind of deck. So I think it's a really cool deck building constraint in order to that makes you want to exile as much different costs as you can to be able to maximize the value of this thing, and also play enough colorless cards to get the evoke trigger while also having a contingent of colored cards that let you take advantage of it with like blink effects, reanimate effects, all those sorts of things.
I like that they chose something that feels quite right for fleshing out the sixth, I guess, card for that incarnation cycle.
Yeah, this one goes pretty hard. I like it. Um, you can definitely pretty easily get token decks with this, but also it's a token deck and it can be gotten by a lot of stuff. So I don't know that that's like the worst thing. Um,
Here's a challenge. What's the best, like, if you were to build a deck? Actually, I guess it depends on what meta you're playing against. uh like
Probably
what
3 or 2,
mana
right?
value colorless cards are you including in your deck the most?
I feel like, yeah, probably like 3 or 2.
Two.
Yeah,
I'm on two for sure.
like,
If
Yeah.
it's constructed, like two.
yeah, the problem is like, or maybe not a problem. An interesting challenge is like, what kind of deck are you playing this in where you don't just accidentally shoot yourself in the foot, right? Because you also want to be able to you also want to be able to like presumably like expand your own board presence, whatever, etc., etc. But naturally, the cards you exile to this are going to be the same mana value as some of the cards you're playing. So I think I feel like this would be really good if there is like some sort of like colorless control deck, which is something I've been wanting to exist for a while. Um, the I think that would be a really hype type of deck, and this would be pretty interesting in it. And I think yeah, I think some of the incarnation cycle in MH2 definitely felt a little uh, pushed for the wallet type of thing. This one it feels like there's some actual play to the card disadvantage slash there's some actual uh, like deck build like there's a larger deck building constraint available. So yeah, I vibe. Oh yeah, wow, it's already back around to me. Um, let's see. I'm gonna hit up from the mtg.design file Zriyalm with a Z. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. Um, this is Zriyalm Parallelistic Enigma, designed by AlexHubbell. It's a 5 color legendary creature. Whenever you play or cast one side of a double-faced card, you may pay all casting requirements for the side that wasn't chosen. If you do, copy that side of the card. Copies of permanents become tokens. And in reminder text, it says if a side doesn't have a mana cost, pay 2. I feel like that would have to be a rules text. If a side doesn't have a mana cost, pay 2 instead. Um, I think this is super cool. And I kind of wish that if it was going to do this, it would include other stuff like split cards as well. But I think the concept in general is it like the idea of like, yeah, let's just double the value you get out of this. Like, you get both the transformation and this, or maybe even like one thing you could do is like, uh, you pay 2 plus 1 mana of the colors that permanent is, something like that to make it so that you. But I guess you're altering a 5 color deck, so color pie be damned at that point. So you can just pay 2. Um, but yeah, this is just really splashy and fun, and I think that one pitfall that people usually fall into when designing commanders in general, but also especially 5 color commanders, is they lack enough of a build around element and either tend to be generically good or generically bad. Here, there's a clear theme that you want to build around, which makes it exciting and makes it easy to find what kind of synergies or cards you want to include to make this uh, really pop off. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this, and I also think that it uses a type of art we rarely see in Magic proper. So that's another +1.
I like that it makes me want to avoid maybe some of the popular double face cards that are legendary, like all of the origins planeswalk or legendary creatures into planeswalkers. I want to be careful about accidentally flipping Liliana over to my copy token Liliana. Then I have to kill one of my. I'd lose a permanent. So instead, I'm challenged to play non-legendaries, unless I'm sure that one won't flip into the other. I guess the modal double face cards are like one of those, or I guess disturbed. Yeah, so that's cool. It makes me a little cognizant of that. The 5 colors makes me go, okay, all right, I can. That's a big hump to go over for the big value you can get for only having to pay 2 for the transform style double face cards.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the point you made earlier, Caillou, that this should definitely hit split face cards. Honestly, like looking at this, it seems like it would make a lot more sense, or if it just hit split cards, because like if the whole if a side doesn't have a mana cost pay two thing to me feels pretty clunky as a solution, and that's like that's part the part of the card that I'm the most weak on. But like other than that, I think this is really cool. I think something that might even be more interesting is that instead of like copy that side of the card, maybe it splits the card into two so that you copy each face of the card and then neither can transform. I don't know if that would be feasible, but like I think this is a cool concept and a cool take on it. With the implementation is a little off just because of how the costing of double faced cards works. And if there was like another way to do that, I think that'd be sick. Um, but I don't know. I don't know how you go about doing that. So who knows? But overall, I think this is a really cool design, and I'm super into it.
Okay, Bradley, what's your next card going to be?
Okay, let's go on over to MSC file. Let's have a little bit of fun with Ascendedthalid. Uh, yeah, fungus and saprolings, tribal sort of deck. Uh, I like how it feels very natural with the Volve, but also that like the gameplay patterns of fungus and saprolings, they naturally incur a lot of enter the battlefield type of deals. Although I guess the saprolings that spawn off of the fungus are just one ones and won't trigger the evolve, but perhaps your other fungus cards, or if you have other types of tokens, they would cause those saprolings, all of them, to get scarily bigger. So it makes me want to get creative with how to build around such a peculiar position.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that this is the really cool design, just in terms of like how it fits into the sort of vibes that fungus and saproling typically have gone for. Saproling is, some of the smaller creatures that are kind of subservient to other sorts of types, and how evolve kind of fits in. So like you're playing the small saproling tokens, and then you can play bigger creatures to put counters on them. It feels like a natural sort of evolution of the lore.
Evolution, you
Um,
say?
fuck. Yeah. I did not intend that at all. But yeah, I think it's really cool. I also think it's insane that they found that art for 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 Thallid Monk. That seems crazy.
I think it's a
To me,
canon
again,
art. I think it's a
oh, is it?
it's a promo art for Seedborn Muse, I think, but don't quote me on
That
that.
makes
Yeah,
sense. Yeah, because
commander
I was gonna
collection.
comment. Okay, I was gonna comment. It seems like one of those designs where you just you find a sick art and you're like, okay, how the hell do I design around this?
Ah,
Is like, yeah. But if it's a canon art, I don't know. But yeah, overall, I
I
think
mean
it's
that
really
also
cool.
that just answers the question of how they found the art. But I always
Fair enough.
one thing that I've been enjoying seeing is that I'm generally lukewarm on cards that reuse canon art just because it's hard to also like
Hmm.
identify them in play if you're planning to use them for that. But there have been a lot of people who've been like repurposing canon art for other like flavor or mechanical choices that those
Hmm.
cards could also imply, and I think that that's been uh, when we've been seeing that kind of flip, it's been really cool, and I think this is one of those moments for sure. Yeah.
For sure, yeah. But yeah,
I
overall,
like
I like the loot narrative vibe that it gives, and yeah, I fuck with it.
I like what you said, Gateways, about subservient to other types, and implying not just fungus but others, and that reminded me of how we have two tree folk cards that both reward you for playing saprolings from like way back then. So this makes me excited to go and play these big 4/5 and 4/7 creatures.
Yeah, I just this last thing I guess to say is that like, this feels like a card that should already exist, like an evolve lord, because it's such like a it's such a good way to like naturally make your small creatures bigger in a meaningful way. Like that isn't just straightforward, that requires a little bit more like it's just a natural build around. So yeah, I'm this is a design I really really vibe with. It was also in my list. So shout out to Angel of Grace for this design. Okay, what is your next card going to be, Gateways?
Yeah, so one card I want to look at is in the MSE file. It is Alluring Harmony. It's a pretty simple common card. 3 and a red for a sorcery. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each bard creature you control, and it just active treasons a creature. And, it's really simple. There's not much to it, but I think this is a really good example of how to do common design right. I think there's a lot of flavor elements in here, and there's a lot of elements that make me think about what the mechanical gameplay of this set is going to look like. So, flavorfully, obviously, it takes the active treason effect and spins it in a new light in terms of like having it be a song that someone is playing, which I think is really cool. And I don't think we've seen that iteration of the flavor before, because I know we've seen like parties and stuff. We've seen
There's technically like captivating crew, which could be like
that's what I was thinking.
Oh,
but
okay.
the crew
For some reason, when you said parties, I just thought of like cannon party, like in the party mechanic. But yeah,
yeah, but but yeah, but like I think the interesting part of this design for me is like, hey, we all know that active treason is a card that's best used in conjunction with sacrifice decks. You can gain control of a creature and then sacrifice it, and that's how you get the most value out of the card. And so when you combine this effect with like a bard tribal element, it makes me think about like, hey, what do bards do in this set? Because we never really had a bard tribal identity before. Or like we've had bards, but I don't think we've seen actual tribal for them yet. And it just makes me think like, hey, is this like a black red bards deck that's looking to like steal creatures, sacrifice them, and like kind of do sort of tricksy things like that, or is it like in a different color, and we're going to be able to see that cool synergy? So like for me, it's just like a cool promise of like, hey, we're mixing up this sacrifice deck with bards, and that's like a cool intersection of ideas. And I don't know, I really enjoy it, even if it's not too deep.
yeah, I've been a common design stan, so you know that I love this. I also like this inclusion for a few reasons. One, this is kind of a meta thing, but I like how we went from one card designed by Angel of Grace straight into the other card designed by Angel of Grace. It really shows that they were on their A game this week. Uh, Second off, I like this because yesterday's card that Angel of Grace submitted was Amadeus something something, which was like legendary bard tribal. And so I think that they probably were like, yeah, we need more bard support actually. I like this. And they're continuing making more bard support cards after making that because yesterday was duel and they made like I think like kind of a joke like, hey, here's a bard for Battle of the Bands. But they were like, wait, yeah, bards are cool. So let's keep it going. Yeah, other than that, I guess all my comments would be the same as yours. It's just uh, it makes you ask questions, which I think is the best thing any riff common can do uh, when you see them, because you already know what the effect is generally for. Now you're wondering how it ties into the set's themes in a greater context. So if I opened a pack and saw this, I would immediately be like, okay, I can build around this. Let's see what there is. Go for it. But yeah, okay. So we're just about edging on 50 minutes now. So I'm going to open up the last round. So we're going to do one final round, and then Gateways, you can tell us about the two cards that you designed today. Um, so my last card for the day is going to be from the mtg.design file. It's going to be Mystic Replenisher. And I'm choosing this because I love learning stuff from doing Moxtober. And one thing that I learned this year, not because of this card, but just in general, is when I was looking up stuff for the prompt Mystic, is that Mystic is a canon type. It was in Odyssey. They had, I think, a few cards, or maybe like one or two cards in Time Spiral block, but it was a white tribe that cared about threshold and gained fly. Yeah, and like lots of them did have like protection from black. They also usually gained flying on threshold. Um, and there is one green-white card. That was the only multicolored Mystic. Um, and so I love Mystic Replenisher as kind of a callback to the original canon Mystic tribal identity. Um, and it's just like solidly functional too, as like, hey, this thing is a 3/4 vigilance beater that also has hexproof from the most common removal color, and can help you recur, can like loop permanent cards or cheap creatures, which is what most of the other mystics are. So yeah, this is a really solid design. Shout out to CyberFive.
So cool that, like, if you're gonna bring back Mystic from that group, that you're also making sure to cement it in uh, identifying with that group of nomad mystics. The Like you said, the there's the hexproof from Black here that calls out where Judgment was a green white set and Torment was a very heavy black set. So this feels right at home there and fills out the multicolor Nomad Mystics threshold from that block as well. It's firing on all cylinders for, yes, this is referencing that group, and I think that's pretty solid.
Yeah, 100%. I think I one part I like about this design is how, because of its effect, it really forces threshold to be variable rather than like once you've reached it, you kind of have threshold for the rest of the game. Because its threshold trigger is returning things from your graveyard to your hand or the battlefield. So it's like it's kind of like other mechanics like maybe delve, in that it's using the graveyard as a depletable resource rather than a condition that it checks in a cool way. And I think that's really sick, especially when you have like a really efficient trigger that you still definitely want to use, even if it's hurting your chance to threshold in the future, because it's a really good ability.
Okay, Bradley, what is your last card for the day going to be?
Okay, this one's in. I feel like maybe divisive, not sure on mtg.design in terms of like what it's referencing. If you liked this card that it references, Ouija, the as in the board. Um, so this card references the card Seance, which is a really weird card in that you can bring a card back, but a creature card back, but it doesn't have haste, so you can't use it for attacking, or and then it goes away at end of turn, so you can't use it for blocking. You usually would want to build around Seance to use whatever ETB or leave graveyard or dice, or I guess exile. So yeah, leave graveyard triggers or its activated abilities, things like that. And in this case, it's letting you do a Seance off of everyone's graveyards. But the white part letting you have people choose, they'll choose which ones they give you to kind of be like you're not just stealing their effects. So again, it's again being weird in that, oh, are you actually going to be able to make use of it, because you can't guarantee their creatures are useful. So yeah, I think it's a nice stab at doing that reference. Whether or not it plays out super well, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I like the play of your opponent getting to choose the card they give you, because even if they have a high value target, it's like you don't get the feels bad of they don't ever get to give it to you, but because it's like you're like, oh, okay, you're running out of creatures in your graveyard, better get it quick. Um, but they also have the thing of like, okay, if I can hold off for long enough, I can dig for an answer. And meanwhile, obviously, yeah, it has the same thing as Seance, where you build around it, you get some cards with crazy good ETBs, and go ham. So yeah, I'm generally a fan of this card. Shout out to I don't know if that's COAnon or C0Anon, but thanks to them.
Yeah, I think this design is really awesome. I am worried about the power level, definitely, just because it's like I mean, it is a strictly better Seance, right? Like, Seance is already not great, but not a terrible card by any means, because you can accrue a lot of sick ETB effects. And with playing Luigi, You get access to a lot of cool. Not only do you get access to the same creatures that you would have gotten before, but you also get a free blocker every turn as long as your opponent's playing creatures. So power level, worrying, but like in terms of design, I think it's excellent. I think that the knob being there of, hey, if your opponent doesn't have any creatures in your graveyard, you don't get jack shit, is really cool. I think the having the flying there makes it a more effective blocker. I think that's like a cool dimension to add, and like just the fact that it can block in general is just a cool dimension to add. So I think it does a cool job of like iterating on Seance and really like making it into its own sort of design with a lot of unique play patterns that's going to behave a lot differently. I think they should probably tack an extra white into the casting cost, but like, hey, this is sick.
Oh man, I miss the potential for it being a nice extra blocker. I was so focused on how to take advantage. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Nice little padding for your white, maybe defensive deck.
Okay, and with that, Gateways, what is going to be your last card that someone else designed?
Of course. So we're going to be looking at Grace for the Graceless from the MTG design file by Mark Confidant. Um,
Mhm.
it's a 3 white instant. For each creature card in a graveyard, if it was put there from the battlefield this turn, return it to the battlefield under control. And more interestingly, it has the keyword Mystify for 1 white and a white. You can pay 1 as a sorcery to exile this spellbounded creature you control, and then when that creature leaves the battlefield, you can cast it for its Mystify cost. So I think this is a really sick design. I think there are a lot of different dimensions it plays on. So firstly, there's the obvious element of like, hey, it's the name of the card. There are a lot of variants on it. I don't remember the name at this moment, but it's a tried and true design that's really fun in Commander and does a lot of cool things for decks that are playing around with the graveyard a lot, sacrificing a lot, or just as board wipe protection. And I think
Second
the
Sunrise and Friends.
second Sunrise, yeah, thank you. I think where this card gets really interesting is that Mystify ability. I think that being able to tack it onto a creature for 1 makes it so that there's a reasonable hoop there, and the fact that there's a Mystify cost means that um, when the creature leaves the battlefield, you can cast a spell. So it's like a board wipe insurance basically. If you have it attached to a creature, it's, hey, I can just pay 3 mana to be able to just bring the whole board back. Um, and I think that and that applies both to your opponent's board wipes and your own board wipes. And I think that the cool element here is that there's still absolutely a shields down moment, because you need 1 white up to be able to use this Mystify ability. So it's not absolutely free by any means, because you need a lot of mana up to protect against your opponent's board wipes to use this as protection from removal and that sort of thing. So and it's like still a pretty big drain on resources, because like the effect normally goes for 3 and a white. So 1 white isn't really too cheap of a cost. But what I think it does well is sort of deters opponents from being able to drop their big tricks. And I think it's just a really neat design with a lot of different niche interactions that really add texture.
What was the name of the card again?
Grace for the Graceless in the MTG
Question
design file.
question for the reminder text of Mystify tells me to exile the card spellbound to a creature. I think the intent is from hand to give it a little shortcut, but is it supposed to be from graveyard?
I mean, that's not. I assumed it would be from hand, because
Yeah, yeah.
it's like I assume it's supposed to be like foretell, I guess. Like that seems like the best comparison.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this design is pretty cool, and I like the mechanic. It definitely feels like foretell, but um, I think that, yeah, the ability to miss the timing definitely is a feels bad, but this probably exists in an environment where you can control that to some degree. So either both through a flash archetype or an aristocrats archetype, etc. Then you just have it spread across, say, Esper colors or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also the thing is like if you have a lot of these, you can like spread them out amongst your creatures so that there's never really like a feels bad with a removal spell kind of ganking you. So maybe like a board wipe gets there, but
Yeah,
like
or
there
you can
should
just like
be.
literally naturally cast it because they're also instance.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I think if you put mystify stuff on things that are already instant speed, it's going to result in a lot of good gameplay because you naturally want to keep up mana for them anyways. So yeah,
Mm-hmm. This is like totem armor for all your creatures if you just do the mystify part, uh, which is cool.
okay. And with that, gateways. Talk to us about the cards you designed for today.
All right, so I have two cards that I designed for today. They're in the MSC file. First, we're going to be looking at Arana Wildskeeper Mystic. That's Arana. Arana Wildskeeper Mystic is a 2/3 legendary creature human mystic. It has at the beginning of your end step, mill a card. If it's a creature card, you gain 2 life, and then as long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, Arana gets +2/+2 and has trample, and it's a 3/3. So I had the same thought process you did, looking at the Mystic cards, and I wanted to make a card that the starting point of my design was, hey, let's make a card that kind of showcases the Mystic thing, however subtly it may be. So I ended up on this, where you just have a basic trigger for a threshold that's unkeyworded because I didn't want to be too obvious about it, and then a +2/+2 and trample. Because for the Mystics that were printed, a lot of them had just one-off keywords. Flying, I think, was the most common. So I said, hey, let's just do +2/+2 and get a buff, so that it's like a neat statted creature that could be used in standard, right? And then I was thinking, hey, how do I want to fuel that threshold ability? I figured simplest way to do it is just a mill trigger, and if it's a creature card, you gain 2 life. So it's not too complex of a card. It's pretty simple legendary design, but I think it'd be a fun add to like a standard environment where you can get value out of that mill, life triggers, trample, and damage as like a just a large creature. So I think there are cool number of knobs here that make it interesting.
Yeah, I am I'm excited to try to make this curve into I swing on turn 5 with the 5/5 trample, but using green colors to accelerate the mill. Um, like I might try bulching or whatever, in addition to the mill card part. And props to doing that subtle threshold reference and using monocolor green to balance out all those mono white mystic cards that currently exist.
Yeah, I almost feel like this could definitely like you could push this a little bit harder. Um, the reason I say that actually is I saw this card. I'm like, damn, this reminds me of something. So I went and I looked on the Revolution Manifesto search engine, and Kutalia actually has a card that's really similar to this, except uh, it's the same mana cost, 2 green. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to surveil one, and it gets +3/+3 and trample as long as there are 8 or more cards in your graveyard. But it starts off as a 5/5. So definitely,
What? That's crazy. What the hell?
it also
That's
sees
so nuts.
it also I think has seen like maybe not zero play, but it's seen play in like one deck. So I think it's one of those things where like getting like being a big beater is good, but 4 mana is like kind of that awkward point where you really want ETB value or some sort of and like you do get the single surveil, but something a little bit more juicy. So I definitely think that Arana could be juiced a little bit. Though,
Yeah,
like,
that makes
but this and obviously this is independent of like this is mostly Bradley already said all the stuff that I like about the card, which is I like that it references the original Mystic thing. I like that it's mono green so that you can have a new generation of Mystic stuff. The gain life points to a lot of like it feels like space that could be overlapped with white, etc., etc.
Yeah,
yeah.
like in limited, I think I'm glad that it's at where it's the size and cost here because gaining 2 life per turn. If you went all creatures, I'm glad that you have the. It's not just it's super huge and it gains you life, all at the same time. Whereas maybe I'm scared of it being oppressive in that manner.
Well, it doesn't have vigilance, and you can also like you have to run lands. So I think that like they so I
Dang
think that
it.
like those do balance it out a little. But I get the general thing of what you're saying of like if this thing is trying to race you, it shouldn't also have a way to help them stay. If this thing is racing you and also giving them a way to stabilize, that's probably good enough.
Mm.
But yeah, one thing I forgot to mention, I figure funny story. So my original design, I had a different entire set of designs for this day. So I had gone through and I'd done like a full design, full 2 cards for the set, and I posted them in the chat. And it turns out I'd created up an entirely fake word that wasn't on the list at all. I made it an entry for a hermit because I think I thought of mystic and then like it went to like someone who's a hermit, and then I just made that my word somehow. So I had a fun entry in the works about a dude and his pet hermit crab. The dude was a hermit, and I kind of went on the pun angle. It was stupid. I figured I'd just mention it. I thought it was funny. But yeah,
I'm here for crabs and hermits.
it was a good crab moment. But yeah, okay. So with that out of the way, my second design is Mystic Command. It is it's just also in the MSC file. It's Sultai, black, green, blue for an instant with choose two. Each opponent discards a card. Creatures you control gain hexproof until end of turn. You draw a card and you lose 2 life. Or return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So I started by wanting to make a Mystic Confluence, and then I looked at Scryfall and I realized that was already a card. So we decided not to make a Confluence. um, so I went for Mystic Command instead. So I wanted to, just do a fun modal spell because I thought the art suited it, and I thought it was, a fun idea. So my sort of philosophy for how I wanted to go about it was I wanted each effect to kind of represent like a different 2-color pairing. So for a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, that was supposed to be like the black green. Draw a card and lose 2 life was like the black blue. Creatures you control get hexproof was the green blue. And then each opponent discards a card. I couldn't think of anything else, so I just threw in a fourth thing. So there wasn't really any decision there, but it was just sort of like I wanted to do a thing that kind of more naturally combined the elements of all 3 colors rather than having like this is the blue effect, this is the black effect, this is the green effect. I think it turned out pretty well. I think the design's cool, and I think there are a lot of interesting play patterns here, specifically with the hexproof mode in terms of protection, creature card from your graveyard to your hand. If you're playing multiple opponents, making them each discard a card is 3 for 1 value. So I think there are a lot of cool angles here, and I think like a lot of the command cycles just have that's like the inherent draw of the command cycles that you can just do a lot of fun things with it.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
like
like
lots
all
of
the
these modes are. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh yeah. I like that you included the hexproof part to really make sure this makes this reason why it would be an instant versus like a sorcery that you may juice it up a little bit. It's kind of spicy to have instant speed discard card, but with 3 colors, you can maybe gotcha somebody when they're trying to hold on to something big in their hand. So that's cool. I'm excited by that. And yeah, and you've ensured that there's probably always 2 modes that are relevant to at any point in time. If you've got no creatures on the battlefield to give hexproof to, or it's not applicable, or if opponent has no cards in hand, you probably have a creature card in your graveyard, and of course you always want to draw cards. So yeah, that's really solid.
Yeah, and I love the both of the creature modes encourage you because I feel like commands in general, especially instant speed ones, the flexibility but steep cost is usually something that you only want in slower decks like mid range and control. And I feel like I usually see them more in control, while this one feels like something where you definitely want it in like creature-based mid-range. So I think that the presence of both of those modes offers a lot of like hidden texture to where this goes, which is something I'm a big fan of. Also, I did a last minute import of the crab and his friend into the file if you want to talk about them, Gateways.
Yeah, let me find that image real quick. Or can you just post it in our chat?
No, I cannot. You're going to have to find it yourself.
Fun.
But yeah,
Sorry, just give me a second.
Yeah, I'm just going to move it all the way to the top
Okay,
and
got
start
him.
reading it.
So, we got Amaluk Sea Speaker, which is a 1 blue-black legendary creature human warrior. He has Flash. Whenever one or more cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1 counter on Amaluk, and he partners with Core Crustacean King. And then Core Crustacean King is a 4 blue-red legendary creature crab. It has Trample, and at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, mill 3 cards. You may play cards milled this way until end of turn, and then it partners with Amaluk. So I had a lot of fun designing this thing, this pair of cards. Originally, I had like green in here, but I wanted to use black to more represent the hermit sort of vibe and keep that blue. So obviously it's like a sea based thing. Um, and in terms of the effects of the cards, the partner was basically set up on let's have one that triggers on putting cards to the graveyard and have the other that triggers on that just gives you free mill. And I thought the core Crustacean King was my favorite part of it was just being able to repurpose what's normally exile cards and then you may play them until end of turn, and to mill cards and play them until end of turn and then have a built-in synergy with milling those cards. So I think that's something that Red maybe should look at doing in the future, especially in graveyard heavy sets. It's like, hey, just mill the cards. You may play those cards until end of turn. So if they leave your graveyard, you don't get to be able to play them anymore. But like, just inherently having that synergy built in is something that I think could be really cool. Even if Red doesn't usually get self mill, I think it's a acceptable change to the color pie that might be useful in the future. So yeah, I had a lot of fun making this one. Even though it was wrong, I thought it was a fun, creative endeavor. And hey, crabs, yeah.
I'm also enticed by this mill. You may play these this turn. That's pretty cool to yeah, within the same turn memory issues stuff that's resolved there with just or impulsive draw doesn't have that problem because it's always usually this turn. So cool. I do want to see maybe more stuff like this on future red cards.
Yeah, that like the front half is really functional and strong in a way that I think I'd be interested in playing in a format, while the backside is like one of those things where I see it, I'm like, God damn, how have I never seen this effect before? It's so simple, but it just like makes so much sense for this color combination. So that really impressed me. Yeah, and overall, I think the flavor of these is a lot of fun, and I hope that even though it wasn't an actual Moxtober word, you include it in whatever this rarityless set project that you're doing for Moxtober is.
Oh yeah, I think I need to pick up the images, but I can throw them in. Or I need to like retext everything and whatever. Because I definitely did delete them out of my file because I was just very embarrassed when I realized it was not the right month or day. But yeah, I thought these were super sick cards. I think what you said makes a lot of sense. Like I wanted to do a sort of dichotomy with the front half being more efficient, the back half being more of a look at this big guy sort of thing. Which hopefully makes both, which makes the combination of them a more middle ground in terms of like playability in the future. But yeah, I had a lot of fun making this. Probably more fun than making my actual Mystic entry. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Oh, one thing I'm seeing here, I was wondering about the pre-combat main phase part versus. Oh, you know what? I get it now. Okay, I was all like, if you pay 4 blue red, you probably it's on curve or right when you get 6 lands, and you probably can't play those. Like on the first turn, you probably just played your land. that turn, but I just realized that Amalek would probably get the buff that turn. So
Yeah,
okay,
I
very
think
well done.
yeah, another part of my decision to make it pre-combat was I know there's starting to be like a push against abilities that trigger on your upkeep, that like try to get you to cast spells for some reason or another. Just in terms of like, hey, if you make a decision on your upkeep before you draw a card, that's a feels bad. Like if hey, I draw a card and that's the card I wanted to play.
Oh
So like,
yes.
so yeah, so by putting if we start seeing more changes of these abilities to like pre-combat main phase, you get rid of those feel bad moments and kind of get to be able to make informed decisions. So that's why I decided to go with pre-combat ultimately, and whatever other effects are kind of come from that, that's sick.
Oh right. Pre-combat main phase. This is not at the beginning of combat. What am I thinking? This wouldn't even trigger anyway when it enters the first turn. Well done. Yes, I agree. You should be able to have all the information you have from your draws, which is, I guess, why they did sagas on that. For that reason, I guess there's some cards that prefer to do after you draw.
Okay, well, I don't know why I left like such a big pause there. I was like, for some reason I thought there was going to be something more to that, but my bad. Okay, and with that,
You're in awe.
we're coming to the end of
Okay,
today's
good.
recap. Thanks to Bradley and Gateways for joining me today. You can find the designer credits for all the cards we talked about today in the description, as well as links to the full MSC and MTG.design files we pulled these designs from, and instructions on how you can submit your own cards to those files so that we can consider them for future recaps. But until next time, this is going to be Caillou signing off. Thank you so much for watching.